Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. If you've ever felt just completely dizzy trying to navigate the constantly shifting morality of modern culture, well, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're unpacking a really profound source text titled A Commitment to Truth. We're going to map out some ancient wisdom and look at how it completely redefines what it means to actually live out an active living faith today. Everything we're about to explore is anchored in one massive, paradigm-shifting idea. The text puts it like this: truth is not an abstract philosophical concept, and it's not some adjustable institutional doctrine. The truth is an undeniable person, Jesus Christ. In our postmodern world, we're constantly told that truth is relative, right? Like, your truth is different from my truth. But this claim completely flips that narrative on its head. It establishes the truth is absolute, immutable, and ultimately deeply relational. So, to really unpack this, we've broken our journey down into 5 logical blocks. First, the foundation of false teachers. Second, the weight of the true person. Third, the difference between what's common and what's normal. Fourth, justice in times of crisis. And finally, dead orthodoxy versus living faith. Let's dive right into that foundation. Starting with part 1, the foundation of false teachers. Our source material grounds its entire argument in the biblical book of 2 Peter chapter 2. It essentially maps out this historical cycle of spiritual deception. So in the past, false prophets just emerged right out in the open among the people. But in the present, well, false teachers operate a bit differently. They secretly introduce what the text calls destructive heresies. These are usually these really subtle compromises customized perfectly to stroke human ego rather than aligning with a divine standard. And the tragic future result of all this? The way of truth actually ends up being defamed by the followers themselves. Spiritual error almost never announces itself with a megaphone. It creeps in quietly, kind of tailoring the message to fit exactly what people want to hear. Which brings us to part 2, the weight of the true person. So, think about it. If deception is really that subtle, how in the world do we actually spot it? Ask yourself, how do you identify a counterfeit? The source material gives us this absolutely brilliant real-world example to chew on. Imagine you're walking down Canal Street in New York City, and you're just surrounded by these cheap knockoff watches. But then you walk over to the Diamond District on 47th Street. If you take one of those fakes and hand it to an expert there, they don't even need to pull out a magnifying glass. Why is that? It's because they know the physical weight of the original. And this is the perfect illustration of spiritual discernment. True discernment isn't built by obsessively studying every single cultural lie or fake teaching out there. No, it's developed by intimately knowing the machinery, the structure, and the exact weight of the original. Literally, if a watch is too light, it's fake. If it's too heavy, it's fake. In a spiritual sense, if you are deeply, deeply familiar with genuine truth, your spirit will just instantly recognize when a counterfeit lacks the proper weight. And this brings us right back to our anchoring concept. Truly engaging with truth is not about winning some intellectual debate. It's about intimately knowing a person. It's actually amazing to realize that the more time we spend with the unchanging original, the faster we can spot a cultural counterfeit. All right, moving on to part 3, common but not normal. Now, applying this kind of discernment definitely creates some friction out in the world, and that leads to one of the most memorable, arresting concepts in our source material. It might be common, but it is not normal. Just think about cultural relativism, broken families, or these constantly shifting moral standards. These things are incredibly common in our society. We see them every single day, just blowing in the wind like a weather vane. But God's immutable, eternal principles, those are what actually dictate true normalcy. They stand solid, like a lighthouse. Just because a society accepts a certain behavior as widespread and common, that absolutely does not mean it aligns with the divine normal. Let's look at part 4, justice in times of crisis. So you might be wondering, is it even possible to live by this normal when the environment around us is so entirely compromised? Well, the text points us to the historical resistance of Noah and Lot. Both of these men were preserved in highly corrupt environments, the flood and Sodom. But here's the key. They maintained moral isolation, not geographical isolation. They didn't just pack up and retreat to a mountaintop somewhere. They lived right in the middle of society without compromising their internal principles. Even though they were completely tormented by the lawless deeds around them, they maintained an unwavering commitment to divine principles. The massive theological takeaway here is that the corruption of your environment is never, ever a legitimate excuse for your own moral decay.
This right here is the true definition of justice in a biblical context. It means standing solid and totally uncorrupted, even if you find yourself living in the modern equivalent of Babylon. You don't just change the eternal landmarks just because the culture decided to shift its borders.
Finally, part 5, dead orthodoxy versus living faith. This brings us to a highly practical application for the modern church, and honestly, the source material gets pretty confronting right here. Look at this dynamic. Today, roughly 20% of a congregation serves as active volunteers carrying 100% of the workload. Meanwhile, the remaining 80% just act as passive attendees. They come to consume, socialize, and then leave. It visually exposes a massive, very real crisis of action. And this dynamic perfectly illustrates what the book of James calls a dead faith versus a living faith. Dead orthodoxy is knowing the truth intellectually, right? It's discussing theoretical theology from the absolute comfort of your couch. It's passive consumption, and ultimately, it's just a comforting illusion. Living faith, on the flip side, looks exactly like the early church in the book of Acts. It's organic service, it's actively supplying the needs of others, and actually demonstrating your faith through tangible, real-world action. A true commitment to the truth inevitably results in a living faith. You simply cannot claim that Jesus Christ is the absolute center of your life if your daily actions and your service to others don't reflect his reality. The truth transforms communities, but let's be real, it requires our hands and feet to do the heavy lifting. Which leaves us with a pretty heavy, lingering question to end on. Based on everything we've mapped out in this explainer today, from knowing the exact weight of the original truth to refusing to normalize cultural decay, what are your works in the body of Christ? Are you just studying the truth, or are you actually living it? Take that question with you. Thanks so much for joining me today. Keep testing the weight of what you hear, and I'll catch you next time.